Shalom everyone, welcome to the 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day. We're very excited to be here, myself, Chaim Richman.
Yitzchak Reuven.
Here we are in Jerusalem, capital of the world, to bring you the 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day live stream video happening in honor of the Holy Temple, in honor of the Master of the Universe, in honor of the restoration of Holy Temple consciousness, in honor of the month of Nisan, which is really the beginning of time. The month of Nisan is such a special time, the time of our past and future redemption. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is coming up this week, is the day that the tabernacle in the desert was dedicated. It's the day that was crowned. Our sages tell us it was the day upon which the divine presence returned to earth, the Shekhinah, the first day of the service in the tabernacle. So it's a time of tremendous spiritual significance, and we're going to be bringing you 3 hours of inspiration, information, beautiful entertainment, all focused on the world of the Holy Temple. And I think that this 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day happening is maybe the most exciting one that we've ever done. Yitzchak, some of the guests include
Baruch Sterman from Ptil Tekhelet Organization. Baruch will be telling us about his new book, all about the history of the discovery and rediscovery of the chilazon snail for producing the blue Tekhelet dye for the beged, the garments of the high priest.
And we're going to be also taking you to the moon.
Absolutely, right to the moon, or at least
we're going to be looking for the moon.
Yeah. Sighting the new moon was actually the new moon of Adar, because the new moon of Nisan hasn't happened yet, but we'll be taking you there on a nice, exciting, cold, and blustery evening.
We're going to be visiting the Knesset. Later in our broadcast, we have the special privilege of going to the office of newly elected Knesset member Moshe Feiglin, who is a member of the current government in Israel, who speaks in the most unabashed and forward way about the relevance and the necessity and the drive to rebuild the Holy Temple today.
We're going to be hearing the most beautiful, exquisite music and wisdom from Shlomo Katz, beloved musician, world-renowned.
We're even going to have a beautiful welcome and receive the blessing of the founder of the Temple Institute, our Rabbi Israel Ariel, in his home here in Jerusalem. We have a lot of surprises also in store for you, and you at home can join us, hopefully, through the wonders of technology. Look at the widget, the chat widget, I believe it's called, on the www.templeinstitute.org page, and you can log in and you can actually online chat with us, with Yitzchak and myself, during the entire broadcast. And also, you can call 1-800-940-9121, and you can pledge your much appreciated and greatly needed support for the Temple Institute, which will help to sponsor this event, and you will very gratefully be acknowledged as such during the course of our broadcast, and also you will be aiding very greatly the holy work of the Temple Institute towards the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. That number again to call, that's not to speak with us, it's to pledge for sponsoring the event, 1-800-940-9121, and additionally, you can chat with us throughout the evening. And let me take this opportunity to acknowledge with great thanks a grant from the Shraga family of America that has enabled us partially to bring you this broadcast. So we are extremely excited, grateful to Hashem, and just really, really revved up to be with you now for the 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day happening. And our first guest, it's a great privilege and honor to bring him on right now, Baruch Sterman, who's written a very compelling, beautiful, wonderful book called The Rarest Blue. Baruch Sterman of the Ptil Tekhelet Organization is here to tell us all about the search for the rarest blue.
My guest today is Baruch Sterman. Baruch is a physicist.
Yep.
He's an inventor, I understand from your book. And most significantly for us today, Baruch is an investigator, a hunter, an expeditionaire in the search for the snail. In fact, one of the titles in Baruch's new book is In Quest of the Holy Snail. Baruch is one of the founding members of the Ptil Tekhelet Organization, which has recreated the production of Tekhelet, of the blue dye, the biblical blue dye that was supplied the garments and a lot of the tapestries in the Holy Temple, as well as the blue fringes that every Jew would wear. And the secret of the dye was lost for about 2,000 years.
Right.
And Baruch and Ptil Tekhelet have rediscovered, with the help of a lot of other people along the way, have rediscovered the source of the dye, and they are producing the dye today. Baruch has recently, with his wife Judy, written this beautiful, wonderful book about the search for the snail in order to produce the blue dye known as Tekhelet. And this book, I've got to tell you, has everything in it. It's history, it's science, it's physics, it's optics, it's chemistry, it's biology, and it's an adventure. It reads almost like a novel, but it's full of facts. I love the book. In fact, I fell in love with the book. I've read a lot of books in my time. I even have a degree in books. But this one is in that rarefied list of favorite books. I really, everybody, as soon as the show's over, go to your computer, click on Amazon. I don't care where you get it. Get hold of this book. You have to read it. Baruch, tell us about your book. I'm going to say one more thing, and that is this book, which is about the rediscovery of a little snail, which blends in with the ocean floor because it has all sorts of waste and debris and litter that accumulates on its shell. And to me, it's a metaphor for the Jewish people. It's a metaphor for the honor of God. It's a metaphor for all that we do in the Temple Institute, in that 2,000 years of exile has caused a lot of dust and dirt and grime to accumulate. And now that we're back in the land, we are uncovering and polishing things off. And I'd like to hear from you.
Well, thank you. It's like that's a great endorsement of the book, and I have to say that we really do we really look at this as such an accomplishment. I've been involved in this for close to 25 years now, and researching all of these issues and researching everything that has to do with it. What's amazing is that every day that goes by, we learn something new, and that I hope is reflected in the book. It's not only about some small little snail or some dye or some color that was used that was invented 4,000 years ago and then went into disuse and fell into to this oblivion of history. But it starts to branch out in all of these different ways. And as you research things, I guess it's really true about everything. When you start to look at any topic, you're going to start to dig and you're going to start to find out that knowledge is interrelated and historical events lead you from one thing to another thing. And so for me, Tekhelet has opened the door to an understanding of how everything, not only everything in God's world is interrelated, but everything that man understands is interrelated. So for us, this has really been a wonderful experience. What you mentioned, the idea of this lowly snail, right? And the metaphor for the Jewish people and so on. I think it's really true, and I think that's one of the reasons why this snail was chosen within the Bible to be the object that produces such an important color, the color that was used to drape the Holy Ark, and to be the dividing curtains within the temple, to be the cornerstone color and fabric of the garments that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would wear, and then on top of it, right? So all of these things are so lofty and so important. This was the clothes that the kings would wear. In fact, in a few days, we're going to be reading the Megillat Esther, where Mordechai, when all of the upheavals finish and Mordechai ends up on top, the Megillah tells us, and Mordechai went out in the clothes of royalty, the clothes of kings. What was he wearing? Tekhelet. So Tekhelet is really, on the one hand, the royal fabric. And that's what it was all over the world, right? Now let's just remember, Tekhelet was not only worn specifically by Jews. Tekhelet was worn on the togas of the emperors of Rome. Alexander the Great found it draped over the coffins of Darius when he visited Persia. So this was an extremely, extremely expensive and luxurious item. And what did the Jews do with it? The Jews said, every single Jew, every person, farmhand and tailor and shoemaker, every single Jew has to have this one little string on their garment, because the Jews were trying to teach the world that every Jew, every human, has this divine spark, and they have this piece of royalty within them. So everybody wears tchelet, whereas the Romans made it exclusive. Only the greatest generals and only the kings and the emperors could wear it. The Jews made it inclusive, very democratic. Everybody is a child of God, and everybody can serve God.
And of course, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, also wore a tunic of solid blue.
Yep, right. So again, so that's what we feel is such a beautiful and important lesson that Tchelos tells us. And maybe that's why I'm not saying that we're necessarily lowly snails, but we're certainly not great people. The people who were involved in bringing it back in this generation, myself and my friends and the people who we work with, we're just regular, everyday people. And the Tchelet is meant to say that even everyday people can have a very, very close relationship with God and have an important function within the world.
You are bringing up another point here, which I'd like to relate to, that you have rediscovered the snail and the process by dint of a lot of hard work and research, and it all works. You discovered how the methods of production were back in those days, and you've recreated those. And you've really demystified the process. I mean, a lot of people today say, oh, that snail must have been something, only God could have produced it, and when Mashiach comes, it'll have it again. And this is an attitude that I think 2,000 years of galut, of exile, it's sort of embedded itself within the Jewish mentality, that so many things are beyond our control, and we just have to wait patiently. But, and of course, this is a message that we try to get out all the time, that it's up to us, and it's all accessible. And the information there, the knowledge is there. We just have to access it.
Right. And in fact, that's a great point, because the people that were involved in bringing the people who were involved in researching it. So 1,300 years, there is no tchelet. Around the year 600, 620 or so, the process was lost. The idea of the snail that it came from, nobody remembers that anymore. It's all gone. And to start to think about bringing this back requires a very special psychology within a different kind of a person. Most people, what is what is accepted, and wouldn't dare to change that. The people who did decide to devote their lives to this, Rav Gershon Henoch, the great Radziner Rebbe, a Hasidic Rebbe who picked himself up and traveled from Poland across the continent, this is in the late 1800s, across the continent, and spent a year in the aquarium in Napoli looking for the sea creature. And Rav Herzog, of course, the great Rav Herzog, who would become the chief rabbi of Israel, did his doctorate on this when he was younger. These are unbelievable people, and all along the way, the chemists and the archaeologists who were involved in this. But when I was growing up, exactly like you mentioned, Yitzchak, when I was growing up, this chilazon, which was the source, right? The Talmud speaks about the source of the tchelet. It came from a chilazon. That to me was like some kind of a mythical creature, from another dimension or another planet. And we didn't know what it was. It was one of these magical creatures, right? And one of the hardest things for us to get our hands around, was the fact that it is not some magical fish or lizard or whatever it was that doesn't really exist. No, it does exist. It can exist. If you go out and you look for it and you try to find it, you have to look at the characteristics that are brought down. But the first thing you have to do is to assume it does exist. Right. It can be found. And once it can be found, we can understand how it is exactly that this was done and processed in other days. But it's that leaving the miracle part of it aside and trying to make it more practical. That was really the mind switch that had to happen.
And of course, the lesson really is that all the mitzvot, all the commandments, are commanded for us to do. So God wouldn't, command us to do something with things that we can't possibly access.
Right. And, but leaving behind the magical and moving to the practical is not an easy thing to do. And it's not an easy thing for a lot of people to do. It's not an easy thing for a lot of Jews to do. And I think that it's no coincidence. There are a lot of commandments that were lost to the Jewish people, right? The temple, right? We don't have a temple yet. When a commandment is lost, right? So it moves into a different realm. We have to think about bringing it back. Tekhelet so far is the only commandment that was absolutely and totally lost to the Jewish people, that at least now potentially we have the ability to reestablish and to do. So it raises a lot of interesting questions. What's important? Is tradition important? Or maybe perhaps authenticity is more important? These are types of issues that have to be raised. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that the first commandment to be reestablished and reintroduced is a commandment that so symbolically is linked with Israel and the land of Israel. You have the snail itself lives off the coast of Israel and lives in the Mediterranean. And this was the hallmark. Some people say that Canaan meant purple dyers. So the land itself is intimately connected with this snail and with this creature. And the flag of Israel, way before anybody thought to bring back Tekhelet, was modeled after the blue and the white, the Tekhelet within the Talit. So bringing back Tekhelet as part of the reestablishment of Israel and part of the reestablishment of the new way of looking at things, I think that that's a very important metaphor.
So you don't imagine that if you had stayed in New Jersey, that you could have ever brought about this?
Well, that's what's so funny about it, because at least there's the rabbi who is involved in this from the beginning, Rabbi Tevger, is a wonderful, wonderful man. His story is amazing as well. We talk a little bit about him and his father in the book. His father was a refusnik that came as a physicist, came from Russia, and he was very involved in the rediscovery of the ancient city of Hebron. Rabbi Tevger is Rabbi Tevger. But then the three who joined with him, myself and Joel Guberman and Ari Greenspan, we're all friends from New Jersey. And we probably wouldn't have gotten involved in this if it hadn't been for the fact that we all know how to scuba dive, which we learned, of course, back on the shores of Asbury Park. Whoa. So it's funny how things that you do can come back and can be used later on in your life.
And I have to admit, for full disclosure, that I actually am one of the founding members of the Amutah, of the nonprofit organization, which not only produces Tekhelet, but you also educate. And of course, this book is a huge boon for that endeavor. So as we started to talk about it a minute ago, so many of the commandments are really intimately related and connected to the land. And so many of the temple commandments, we're relearning a science here. We're relearning about ourselves by rediscovering the land that we live in. It's a very, very exciting process. And I don't think that, you can't have the redemption outside of the land of Israel. We're not going to, it doesn't come from nowhere. We have to nurture it back. We have to really bring it back. The information's there. We have the sources and we have the archaeological evidence. I mean, so much of what you've rediscovered was based on archaeological evidence. It's also fascinating that you discover the amount of knowledge that the ancients possessed. I mean, the whole process of the dyeing process was an industry that was extremely sophisticated.
Right, exactly. In fact, there are quite a number of things that we found out, that science has found out over the last even 30, 40 years, right? That without those breakthroughs, we really would never have been able to reestablish this commandment of Tekhelet. So, for example, when Rabbi Herzog wrote his doctorate, and all throughout his life, he died in 1959, he knew about this snail, but he never categorically accepted this as the source of the Tekhelet. And the reason why is because when he died with it, it had a beautiful, beautiful purple hue to it. And he said, even though, again, all of the scientists and archaeologists and chemists said, well, this must be Tekhelet, because the snail has to be the source of the Tekhelet. What the snail gives you, the purple, must be the Tekhelet. And Rav Herzog didn't accept that. Rav Herzog stood firm and said, no, I cannot accept that. Tekhelet has to be the color of the beautiful sky, the Mediterranean sun, cloudless sky. And he died in 1959. He was never able to reconcile the two. He did believe that this snail was the source, but he couldn't believe the color. And then, just a few years later, 1985, it was discovered that taking the dye, exposing it to sunlight at a very specific time during the process, would give you this magnificent blue, royal blue, exactly the color of the Mediterranean sky. And Rav Herzog never knew that. And that was really the last piece of evidence that needed to fall into place. But even that, still to this day, there are people that claim, oh, okay, so we know how to expose the dye to sun to get it to be blue. But the ancients could never have known such a, but we don't believe that at all. The ancients, people in ancient times, the industrialists, the artisans, they knew a lot. They knew a lot about what they were doing. For thousands of years, they were involved in this industry. So the things that we're discovering today, we're quite sure, that they had discovered these things all along the way. It's, as Roald Hoffman, who's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, and he's done a lot of work on Tekhelet. And he said a beautiful line. He said, this is a science that came from the people, and now we have the right and the opportunity to bring it back to the people. It's a beautiful idea, and I really believe that Tekhelet really is something that was meant to be for all of the people, for everybody, and it came from them, and it was given back to them by God.
There's a midrashic tradition that without the Holy Temple, the colors in the world aren't the same colors. The tastes of the fruit aren't the same tastes. The music isn't as beautiful as it once was. You go in the book, you go into very, very in-depth, but for a layman like me, very easy to comprehend the physics and the optics of the colors and the lengths of the waves and what makes the wavelength of the pure blue of the Tekhelet. And you discover that it's 613, which of course is the number of commandments that were commanded in the Bible. And of course the Tekhelet that we wear on our tzitzit is meant to represent that. When you that was your discovery. When you came across that, you must have had shivers, must have gone.
Well, it wasn't my discovery of the wavelength. It was my discovery of the science article that I had found that in by Verheken, a Dutch chemist. And as soon as I found that, I happened to be, it was, I think, one of the kids was crying, and I was up with them and trying to get them to sleep and bouncing them, and reading, catching up on my reading. And all of a sudden, I found that amazing coincidence.
Right.
And I ran upstairs. I woke up my wife. Oh, you got to see this. You got to see this. So it really is. Almost everything about this book is coincidence, divine providence, and we find ourselves now just so grateful to have been a part of this. Something that started as a curiosity, became an interest and a hobby, very soon became an obsession, and to a large extent now really is, taken over our identity.
So this snail and this blue, I think it not only represents the 613 mitzvot, but it really represents the unity of God and the beauty of His world, because it ties everything, there's a pun there, ties everything together. The Rarest Blue, it's a fantastic book. You got to go out and get it. It's wonderfully readable, and it will change your lives. Baruch, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
that was really an amazing interview, a fascinating guest. I really have to recommend that book, and I think it just opens up a whole new world of understanding on the topic of the Tekhelet.
Absolutely, and we're continuing along with the experiential aspect of living and breathing the life of on earth with the Holy Temple. We're going to take you now with Roy Hoffman, Dr. Roy Hoffman of the Hebrew University, who has founded the Israel Moon Society. We're going to go to the top of the Mount of Olives, where we're going to sight the new moon. So put on your coats and come up with us. It's a blustery, cold, darkening evening.
Now, the 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day is in honor of the new moon of Nisan. But we wanted to demonstrate for you, from a scientific point of view, what the whole concept of the sighting of the new moon as it was in the time of the Sanhedrin, the time of the Holy Temple, is really all about. So, because Rosh Chodesh Nisan is yet to come this week, we did this for Rosh Chodesh Adar. It was a tremendously cold night. I don't know if we were ever so cold in our lives, but I got to tell you that we were waiting for the moon to appear. We knew astronomically, calculatedly, where it was supposed to be, but it was hiding behind some clouds.
So let's not give it away, Rabbi.
Finally came out. So join us on the top of the Mount of Olives for a truly biblical experience of sighting the new moon. And can I just remind you that number to call, 1-800-940-9121, to become a sponsor for the 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day broadcast, and to help in general with the holy work of the Temple Institute. Just want to remind you also, we have some very exciting things coming up in this broadcast. We're going to be visiting Rabbi Yisrael Ariel at home.
We're going to be going to the Temple Mount.
We're actually going to be going up on the Temple Mount. We're going to hear some of the most beautiful, without exaggeration, beautiful, sweetest, moving music in the world from the holy Kohen Shlomo Katz.
We're going to be hearing from a new member of Knesset, Moshe Feiglin.
And more surprises and more exciting guests. So stay with us. 4th Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day.